I read each sentence and then we will see. Okay. So this is the funny thing, that everywhere there seems to be oppositions and contradictions, and this is a fact. Both are, because the one is becoming the many, and at all levels, in the lowest level, the many are infinite, and therefore they can also be opposites. But as you keep going up, the opposites seems to start slowly becoming compatible with each other, and at the highest level there is no question of compatibility, they become only one. So this gradation is there, but at the physical level, when you go to the self, you see that the world is unreal, so you have to account for that. On the one hand we are saying it is not unreal, on the other hand we are saying it is real, because when we look at the surface, it is unreal. And when we look deep inside, behind the surface, we see that there is a permanent reality, the divine presence. Okay, so this we keep in mind and we read the paragraph. But still, unreality is a fact of cosmic existence. We can't deny that. The spiritual experience absolutely confirms that the physical world seems to be unreal. And if all is the Brahman, the reality, we have to account for this element of unreality in the real. So we can't just ignore it. We have to explain how this unreality has come. We have to explain it. If the unreal is not a fact of being, it must be an act or a formation of consciousness. And if there is not, then a status or degree of consciousness in which its acts and formations are wholly or partly unreal. So he's asking a question. So he's saying, if the unreal is not a fact of being, it must be an act. So actually it's not really a question. He's saying, if it is like this, is it not like this? That is what this is the construction of the sentence. If the unreal is not a fact of being, then what is? How to explain? So could it be like this? That's what this is the construction of the sentence. So I'm reading that carefully with the right intonation if I can. Okay. So if the unreal is not a fact of being, okay, that means there is a reality. It must be, how to explain the unreal? It must be a formation of consciousness. Is it consciousness which is just arranging a temporary form? And is there not then a status or degree of consciousness in which its acts and formations are wholly or partly unreal? So consciousness is the absolute reality, but when it comes down, it is making forms of itself. Okay. Exactly like, again we can go back to the image of the huge amount of clay, infinite clay, and it wants to make pots and pans. But some pots are small, some pots are big, and some pots are even broken sometimes. So this is the forms, and the forms can easily be changed. They can even disappear. You can just break up a form. I can break it, it doesn't exist anymore. So that's what he's asking. So is it that there is a fundamental consciousness, and this fundamental consciousness is always real everywhere, but it is creating forms, and those forms are unreal. Is it like that? That's what he's asking. The question mark suggests that. He's asking a question, could it be like this? If this unreality cannot be attributed to an original cosmic illusion, that means to say that there is a fundamental unreality. We have said that there is no fundamental unreality, but if it is like that, like the Buddhists are saying and the Mayavadins are saying, then there is still in the universe itself a power of illusion or of ignorance. If this unreality cannot be attributed to an original, okay, that means it is not fundamentally true, but there is a relative illusionism. It is partly true and partly not true. That's what he's saying. It may not be an absolute. The darkness is not something fundamental. The darkness depends upon the light reducing itself. Okay? Just like the shadow. The shadow is darkness, but it depends upon the light and the conditions. In other words, there is no absolute reality to the unconscious and the evil and the suffering and the illusion. There is no such absolute fundamental reality. It's a conditional reality. That's what is suggested. It is in the power of the mind to conceive things that are not real. So that is we have to concede to the Satchidananda that it is the power to create forms which do not seem to be real. That power we have to give to the mind. We mustn't think that mind, the consciousness is absolutely limited to reality. Why do you have to think like that? We can say that it can create images and forms. Okay, look at the clouds. Okay, it is creating all sorts of forms, but then going on changing and disappearing. So that power is there in the consciousness to create forms which seem to be unreal. It can even disappear. Okay. It is in the power of the mind to conceive things that are not real. It is in its power even to create things that are not real or not wholly real. Its very view of itself and universe is a construction that is not wholly real or wholly unreal. Note the word construction, creation. That which is created in time, and therefore it is also subject to destruction in time. That's a transience in the world. At the absolute highest level, there is no transience at all. It is permanent and it is static because it doesn't need any evolution. It is perfect. So at the highest level, absolute perfection, absolute static, permanent condition. Static, no change. As it keeps coming down, movement comes into the picture and you are in time and space, and there is evanescence, there is relative illusionism, there is transience, there is impermanence in the physical world. So impermanence you can interpret as unreal. Okay. So where does this element of unreality begin and where does it stop? Okay, so now he is saying, okay, we have been arguing, and now if we say that in the highest level there is no unreality, in the lowest level the reality is hiding behind the seeming unreality, then where is it beginning? Where is this process of the one becoming the many, the reality seeming to become unreal, where is it starting? And where is it ending? That's what he's asking. He's not going to answer immediately, but I'll tell you so that there is a clarity of thought in your mind. Okay, it starts at the overmind level. The supermind is absolute reality, but the division, the one becoming the many, starts at the overmind level. That's why Sri Aurobindo says the overmind level, however high the consciousness, it is the starting point of ignorance. Ignorance has defined as seeing the many more than the one. Okay? That's you can define ignorance in that way. When we are seeing the many and thinking it is real, ignorance starts. Okay? So this is what you say. So I read that sentence again. Where does this element of unreality begin and where does it stop? So obviously, for our own study, we'll say it starts at the overmind level and ends where? In the inconscient. Okay. And what is its cause and what ensues on the removal of both the cause and the consequence? So if we remove the cause and the consequence, that means we deny the unreality and we also deny the origin of this unreality, what happens? He's asking. Obviously, if you go to the overmind consciousness and you see that it is starting point, you go even higher up. So when you go even higher up, what happens? What happens is that the unreality disappears entirely and you see the reality everywhere in the supermind. That's what Sri Aurobindo is suggesting. He will tell you that later on. Okay? Sri Aurobindo does not make things easy like we are making it, because he goes on arguing and saying this case, this case, and then finally he gives you the solution. But by that time you have forgotten the question. That's the problem with Sri Aurobindo's text. So you have to very carefully see what he's saying. So, where does this element of unreality begin and where does it stop? And what is its cause, and what happens, what ensues on the removal of both the cause and the consequence. The consequence is the world, in the world, okay, the physical world, and the cause is the overmind, okay. So even if all cosmic existence is not in itself unreal, cannot that description be applied to the world of ignorance in which we live? Can we not say that the world in which we live is unreal? Can we not say that? That's what he's asking. This world of constant change and birth and death and frustration and suffering, and does not the removal of the ignorance abolish for us the reality of the world which it creates? Or is not a departure out of the natural and only issue? Is not a departure like the ascetic is doing. Is that not the only solution? That's what he's asking. He will tell you afterwards, no, it's not the only solution. It is one solution, but it's not the solution. This would be valid. The theory of the ascetic, that would be valid if our ignorance were pure ignorance without any element of truth or knowledge in it. Now, what does he mean by this sentence? He's saying that if that ignorance were something fundamental existing by itself and permanent, okay, if it is like that, then the ascetic is right. The ascetic is, he is within his, within his right to give up the falsehood and illusion of the permanent world being like that and go to the Supreme. But is it really like that? That's what he's asking. He's saying that no, there is no such thing as absolute untruth. There is no such thing as absolute illusion. There is no such thing as absolute unreality. There is no such thing as absolute ignorance. It is all relative. That's what his conclusion is. I keep repeating the Srirangaraman theory so that we have a clear idea, because others are saying the opposite and Srirangaraman is arguing on their basis only and telling us how we have to see things. Okay? Because he has gone to the source and he knows what is creating this unreality and he also knows what is the solution. So this would be valid. What is this? That the world is unreal and it is a place of, look at the language, it's a world of constant change. Okay? Remember that. There's constant change, impermanence in the physical world. And what does it consist of? Birth and death, and frustration and suffering. And does not the removal of the ignorance? I'm getting a phone call, just 1 minute. So, Swami is saying, okay, if there is an unreality, we have to account for it. Then he's asking question, is this unreality fundamental? Does it exist by itself, independent of everything? Is it ever existent? Then he says, no, it could be that there is a, we have to examine, he says, that if there is a cause, we have to see where it is coming from and what is it. All this has to be examined, he says. Okay. So, this would be valid, the theory of unreality and illusionism. This would be valid if our ignorance were a pure ignorance. What is meant by pure ignorance is that there is no mixture of knowledge in it. That's a fundamental reality, without any element of truth or knowledge in it. But in fact, our consciousness is a mixture of the true and the false. Now here is a statement he is making from his experience. But if it is pure logic, then they can be challenged. Okay. So, but in fact, he is saying our consciousness is a mixture of the true and the false. Its acts and creations are not a pure invention, a baseless structure. The structure it builds, our mind, the structure it builds, its form of things or form of the universe is not a mixture of reality and the unreal, so much as a half comprehension, a half expression of the real. And since all consciousness is force and therefore potentially creative, our ignorance has the result of a wrong creation, wrong manifestation, wrong action, or misconceived and misdirected energy of the being. A huge sentence, but basically what he's saying is that the question of reality and unreality does not arise. It is not like that. We are using the wrong instruments to see the reality and the unreality. This is what he's saying. So use the right instruments and you will see the reality everywhere. This is ultimately his solution. Okay, so this discussion takes place in the knowledge and the ignorance in the next book 2 part 2. Book 2 part 1 and book 2 part 2 is the evolution of the spiritual evolution. So that is so he is not agreeing with the Mayavada philosophy. He is saying it is partly real, but there is no absolute necessary to think that that is the only reality. There is no doubt that there is an unreality which you are seeing, but that unreality is not caused by the reality itself. It is caused by your understanding of the reality. In fact, there are two branches of philosophy. Okay, I think they mentioned this earlier also. There is something called ontology and there is something called epistemology. So ontology is the science, the searching for the examination of the reality and the unreality. What is real and what is unreal? The question comes up because a shadow, is it real or unreal? The blue of the sky, is it real or unreal? Is a rainbow, is it real or? So the question arises that there seems to be a mixture. So what is reality and what is unreality? This is what ontology, philosophical principle, starts to look at. But Srimati is saying it's not an ontological problem at all. It's an epistemological problem. Epistemology, it's a question of your using the right instruments. That is the cause of the unreality. And if it is so, then use the right instruments. Who is asking you not to use the right instruments? And what is that? Rise in consciousness and use better instruments. In fact, that's exactly what everything in the physical world is. Na? In the beginning, when the TV was invented, if you remember, it used to be only black and white, and very often the link used to be cut. I remember that. Okay, so after that, slowly, the image started becoming better and better and better, and we have high definition TV now. We have very clear images. So there is a perfection. So your improvement is there. So improve your instruments of knowledge. That's what he's saying. Earlier, we were using telescopes from the ground. Okay, and there was a limit to what we could see in the stars and the planets and all. But now we have a huge telescope out in space. Okay, so you are able to penetrate much deeper, much better images of this universe we can get. So this is what it basically is saying. Don't think that there is unreality fundamentally, but unreality is there. That is because of your instruments. It's a reality for you when you are using bad instruments. That's it. And your bad instruments are the senses. Okay, so that's what he's saying. So your consciousness, the structure it builds, its form of things or form of the universe, either things or universe, okay, is not a mixture of reality and unreal so much as a half comprehension. It's your understanding. You are using wrong instruments. Your mind is very limited and you are using your mind to see a half expression of the real. And since all consciousness is force and therefore potentially creative, our ignorance has the result of wrong creation, wrong manifestation, wrong action, or misconceived and misdirected energy of the being. When we are at the lower level of consciousness, we have a little bit of understanding, knowledge, and also a force, and we also have the power to create. And when we are creating, they are creating defective things. And the defect is being shown as unreality. That's what he's saying. All world existence is manifestation. Okay, so just 1 second. All world existence is manifestation, not the reality, but the expression of that which is real. Again, manifestation, you have to think of it as the poet and his capacity to give expression to what is there within him. So the divine is the poet and the world is the poem. You can think of it in that way. So all world existence is manifestation. That which is inside is being manifested, being shown. But our ignorance is the agent of a partial, limited, and ignorant manifestation. Okay? Ignorance is the agent. He's using these words, but we have to understand it as an instrument. It's easy to understand that. Of a partial, limited, and ignorant manifestation. In part, an expression, but in part also a disguise of the original being. Aha. Now he's adding another thing. He's saying that what you are constructing is not absolute unreal, but you are constructing something which is distorted. The real you are distorting. It's like seeing your image in a broken mirror. You will see all sorts of funny things. Or even a mirror which is, curved mirror, and when you look at it, your neck will be 5 times bigger than your head will be small, things like that. This is what this is a phenomenon of ignorance. Using wrong instruments. If this state of things is permanent and unalterable, if our world must always move in this circle, in other words, permanence, the suffering, pain, misery, perversion, ignorance is permanent, then the ascetic is right. But actually it is not like that. There are other solutions. If some ignorance is a cause of all things and all action here and not a condition and circumstance, then indeed the cessation of individual ignorance could only come by an escape of the individual from world being, and a cessation of the cosmic ignorance would be the destruction of world being. But if this world has at its root an evolutionary principle, if our ignorance is a half knowledge evolving towards knowledge, another account and another issue and spiritual result of our existence in material nature, a greater manifestation here becomes possible. So don't think that the Mayavadian philosophy is the only possibility. There is another possibility. By rising higher to another level of consciousness, you go nearer and nearer to the absolute truth. But in the physical world, its manifestation will always be a partial truth. There is no end to the evolution. That's what he said. So, reality and the cosmic illusion. So, our ultimate conclusion after this para, we go on reminding ourselves of what Swami is going to tell us finally, saying the world is not unreal. There is a reality everywhere, but at the same time, there is you are seeing the physical world in a limited way because your mind is limited. So make your mind unlimited and you will see the reality. This is what we say. But there is another thing. It's not only a question of seeing. There is also an evolution in the physical world. And we can actually help that evolution. That's what we say. To go to the next level. Okay? So 8:15. We can now read the next para. Yasmin or Sumti?
Should I read?
Yeah, Sumti, please read a further distinction.
A further distinction has to be made in our conception of unreality, so as to avoid a possible confusion in our dealing with this problem of the ignorance. Our mind, or a part of it, has a pragmatic standard of reality. It insists on a standard of a fact of actuality. All that is a fact of existence is to it real, but for it, this factuality or reality of the actual is limited to the phenomena of this terrestrial existence in the material universe. But terrestrial or material existence is only a part manifestation. It is a system of actualized possibilities of the being, which does not exclude all other possibilities not yet actualized or not actualized here. Am I clear? Can you hear me clearly?
Yeah. We can hear you clearly. Yeah.
In a manifestation in time, new realities can emerge truth of being not yet realized can put forth their possibilities and become actual in the physical and terrestrial existence. Other truths of being, there may be that are supraphysical and belong to another domain of a manifestation, not realized here, but still real. Even what is nowhere actual in any universe may be a truth of being, a potential of being, and cannot, because it is not yet expressed in form of existence, be taxed as unreal. But our mind, or this part of it, still insists on its pragmatic habit or conception of the real, which admits only the factual and actual as true, and is prone to regard all else as unreal. There is then, there is then for this mind an unreality, which is of a purely pragmatic nature. It consists in the formulation of things which are not necessarily unreal in themselves, but are not realized or perhaps cannot be realized by ourselves or in present circumstances or in our actual world of being. This is not a true unreality. It is not unreal, but unrealized, not unreal of a being, but only unreal of a present or known fact. There is, again, unreality, which is conceptual and perceptive, and is caused by an erroneous conception and perception of the real. This too is not or need not be an unreality of being. It is only a false construction of consciousness due to limitation by ignorance. These and other secondary movements of our ignorance are not the heart of the problem, for that turns upon a more general affliction of our consciousness, and the word consciousness here. It is the problem of the cosmic ignorance. For our whole view and experience of existence labors under a limitation of consciousness, which is not ours alone, but seems to be at the basis of the material creation. Instead of the original ultimate consciousness, which sees reality as a whole, we see active here a limited consciousness and either a partial and unfinished creation or a cosmic kinesis that moves in a perceptual circle of meaningless change. Our consciousness sees a part and parts only of the manifestation. If manifestation it be, and treats it or them as if they were separate entities. All our illusions and errors arise from a limited separative awareness which creates unrealities or misconceives the real. But the problem, becomes still more enigmatic when we perceive that our material world seems to arise directly, not out of any original being or consciousness, but out of a status of inconscience and apparent non-existence. Our ignorance itself is something that has appeared as if with difficulty and struggle out of the inconscience.
Okay, so now he's going even more into details. First, he has told us that the unreality is due to ignorance. That means use of wrong instruments. There is a subject, there is an object, and when the subject wants to know the object, he has to use the process of knowledge, instruments. So those instruments, you have to use the right instruments. This is what they say. So now he says we'll go a little more into detail. Okay. So a further distinction has to be made in our conceptions of unreality, so as to avoid a possible confusion in our dealings with the problem of the ignorance. Let's go a little more into detail. That's what he said. Our mind, or a part of it, there you are. So this is the, now he is introducing another idea. Our mind, or a part of it. In other words, there is a mind right from the supermind, overmind, element mind, intuitive mind, higher mind, then our pure mind and physical mind and vital mind and physical mind, everything. So When we are at a certain level, we are not using the whole mind, we are only using the lower part of it. That is what is creating the illusion. That's what is going to tell us. Our mind or a part of it. Okay. So there is, the mind is infinite and we are using only a small part. And which is that part? We are using pure reason, the pure mind, our mental capacity of logic. That's wonderful instrument compared to the animal, but it is not the ultimate. That's what you say. Our mind or a part of it has a pragmatic standard of reality. It's fine at the physical level, pragmatic standard, practical level. It's fine. It's a wonderful instrument at this level of the physical world. It insists on a standard of fact, that which is fact only, not imagination or other things, of actuality. What is actual, you consider that. What is physical and what you can see for your senses, that is, reason is fine there. There is no problem. All that is fact of existence is to it real. That's the normally what we see. Okay? All that is a fact of existence. The stones are a fact of existence. Animals, worms, okay, plants. This is fact of existence and it is real for you. But for this, all that is fact of existence is to it real. But for it, this actuality or reality of the actual is limited to the phenomena of the terrestrial existence in the material universe. Our mind, our normal mind, sees only the physical world. It does not recognize that which is supra-physical. That's what he's saying. But the supra-physical is real. But we don't see it. That's the whole problem. But terrestrial or material existence is only a part of the manifestation. There are supra-material existence also is there, which we are not seeing. It's only a part manifestation. It's a system of actualized possibilities of the being. So at the highest level, all the possibilities are there, okay? But they have not yet been realized. That's what he's saying. It's like in another place where he has compared the divine creating the world, he is comparing to Shakespeare creating poems. And when Shakespeare has written one or two poems, it doesn't mean that the creative process is over. He can write more. Okay? And if he had lived longer, he could have written even more than what he has written. So that's what he's saying. It gets actualized in the physical world. The possibility gets actualized. Okay? And that's a process that goes on. So let us say 400 years ago, aeroplanes didn't exist. 100 years ago, there were no missiles. Okay? Even 50 years ago, there were no hearing aids. Now there are hearing aids. So that is what materialized. It has become a fact. That's what is everything. So there is a whole process of possibilities becoming actualities. Possibilities becoming actualities. Okay? But terrestrial or material existence is only a part manifestation. It's a system of actualized possibilities of the being, which does not exclude all other possibilities not yet actualized or not actualized here. Here means in the physical world. Okay? In the physical world. So don't think that things which have not appeared here will never appear. It's not like that. They are waiting to come. Okay? They are all waiting in a queue. And when the circumstances are right, they will come into the physical world. So in other words, he's saying that our world now is limited only to the physical, but a time will come when the supra-physical, that also will become a reality here. That's what he's suggesting. Okay? So you should not think that the physical world as it is the ultimate. There is an evolution, and that evolution will produce something even subtler and even more perfect. In a manifestation, in time, new realities can emerge. Truths of being not yet realized can put forth their possibilities and become actual in the physical and terrestrial existence. It's very interesting because that Jules Verne, okay, He was a French novel writer, and he wrote a novel about submarines, okay, when they didn't exist. In fact, now all science fiction also, they write and make movies of things which are not yet real. So you are capable of thinking of things which are not real yet, but they will become a reality afterwards. Okay? So that's the whole thing. That which is not actual today can become actual tomorrow. Is only a part manifestation. It's a system of actualized possibilities of being, which does not exclude all other possibilities, not yet actualized or not actualized here, but they are actualized at the higher levels of consciousness. Remember that Srirambda is forecasting India is free. Mata said it is not going to be free, it's already free in the higher levels of consciousness. Okay? So Srirambda in 1920, he is saying that India will be free. But it took 30 years for it to become a fact. So all these things are waiting to become reality. So the more perfect world also is waiting to become a reality. That's all. It has not yet happened, therefore it doesn't mean to say that this is the final word. In a manifestation in time, new realities can emerge. We see that all the time. No? There was a time when there were no aeroplanes, then aeroplanes came in. Then after that, now we have even drones, and now we have got small, small things which can even make an individual fly in the air. Okay, so things are going on changing. Okay. Become actual in the physical and terrestrial. Other truths of being there may be that are supra-physical and belong to another domain of manifestation, not yet realized here, but still real. They are real subtly, they will become real physically in time. Even what is nowhere actually in any universe may be a truth of being. So, truth and untruth he is going in exploring. There can be subtle truths and there can be physical truths and semi-physical truths. So you are thinking that only the physical is true. So you are saying, no, it's not like that. There are truths in the higher levels of consciousness which will become physical truths later on. Okay? A potential of being and cannot, because it is not yet expressed in form of existence, be taxed as unreal. What we imagine can become a reality tomorrow. But our mind or this part of it, okay, which is that part of it? The limited mind, still insists on its pragmatic habit of or conception of the real, which admits only the factual and actual as true, and it is prone to regard all else as unreal. Only what my senses can see in the physical world, what exists today, is real, the rest is unreal. This is our usual ignorance, and this is what we see. There is then for this mind an unreality which is of a purely pragmatic nature. It is at the very limited physical level that you see unrealities. It consists in the formulation of things which are not necessarily unreal in themselves, but are not yet realized, or perhaps cannot be realized by ourselves in a present circumstance or in our actual world of being. This is not a true unreality. It is not an unreal, but an unrealized, not an unreal of being, but only an unreal of present or known fact. So, the question of reality and unreality is so complex. There are subtle realities which you don't see, and but others can see. Okay, a yogi can see things which you don't see. So that for him, what is real is not real for you. It's a very, very relative question of the real and the unreal. That's what is. Then there is again an unreality which is conceptual and perceptive. Perceptive, you are using your senses of perception. You are using your senses. Okay? Is caused by an erroneous conception and perception of the real. This too is not. Just 1 second. There is again an unreality which is conceptual and perceptive. He is giving you the example of the serpent and the rope. Okay? You see? You are going at night, you are walking, and suddenly your leg hits something which seems to be a snake. But when daylight comes, you see that it's only a rope. So your idea that it was a snake is unreal. That's what he said. There is again an unreality which is conceptual and perceptive and is caused by an erroneous conception and perception of the real. This too is not or need not be an unreality of being. It is only a false construction of consciousness due to limitation of ignorance. These and other secondary movements of our ignorance are not the heart of the problem, but that turns upon a more general affliction of our consciousness and the world consciousness here. It's a problem of cosmic ignorance. So it is not only individual ignorance, but it's also a question of cosmic ignorance. In other words, at the highest level, when there is knowledge and it is manifesting slowly, cosmos also is becoming darker and darker and darker, and the individual is only part of that. So there is a cosmic ignorance. That's what he's saying. Okay? So it's a problem of cosmic ignorance. So we have to examine how this cosmic ignorance is coming. That's the next section of the enlightenment. Instead of the original and ultimate consciousness which sees reality as a whole, we see active here a limited consciousness. What we see in the physical world is limited consciousness, and either a partial and unfinished creation or a cosmic kinesis that moves in a perpetual circle of meaningless change. You can think of it in that way. So sometimes we see the unfinished work and we feel that, oh my God, what is this? This is so imperfect. Actually, you have not finished it yet. Our consciousness sees a part and parts only of the manifestation, if manifestation it be, and treats it or them as if they were separate entities. All our illusions and errors arise from a limited separative awareness. Separative awareness, that's what the problem is. We will discuss later on. Separation, the one becoming the many, that's the problem, which creates unrealities and misconceives the real. But the problem becomes still more enigmatic when we perceive that our material world seems to arise directly, not out of any original being and consciousness, but out of a status of inconscience and apparent non-existence. Our ignorance itself is something that has appeared as if with difficulty and struggle out of the inconscience. So now he's saying something very interesting. Okay, he's saying that the original consciousness, okay, it is limiting itself. But what we see in the physical world is that the inconscience is creating life and creating mind. So how is this? So he has to explain this. Then he will tell you in the next paragraph, in the next chapter, that the power of Satchidananda has got several powers, and it is there involved. It is there involved even in inconscience. That is the problem. So we end here, and now there's only one small para left for the next chapter, and we will be examining the problem of ignorance and knowledge. So he has told us that the problem is ignorance, the wrong use of instruments. Now he will tell you what this means and he will enlarge on it. It is possible to use right instruments, then you have knowledge. If you use the wrong instruments of knowledge, you have the ignorance. Okay. So, because it's already gone to 8:35, we will stop here, and this we will read this last small para next time.